Imagine you're drifting in the endless void of space, stranded, for what seems like what will be the rest of your life, or whatever's left of it. Except that's not the fate you're forced into, because in the distance, there's a planet. I'm saved, you think to yourself, moments before realizing exactly what planet it is. But as you wipe your tears from your eyes, you start to see what planet you're about to land on. Pluto. The dwarf planet that was used by researchers and then completely abandoned. Luckily, you land in a crater where one of the research facilities sat, so at least you have shelter and food and supplies. But unluckily, your ship is stuck in the ice. Just another thing ice fucks up. So now you've gone from being stranded alone in space to being stranded alone on Pluto. Except, are you really alone? The walls of the crater you landed in towers over you, almost higher than your eyesight is willing to reach. Something could be watching you, and you never even know. Now, you're not a quitter. Your family and friends didn't die just for you to join them. You're you, and you is not a quitter. So you're gonna launch yourself back into space, and you're gonna find salvation, goddammit. And that's where the game from developer Foamy starts, with you stuck on Pluto. Your only goal is being to repair your ship and find whatever remains of the CCOT, which is essentially the space government. Let's talk a little more about the game developer, or the person that made this game, before we get into the actual meat of the game itself. The developer of this game, Foamy, doesn't have much information online, neither does this game, but when I looked up Foamy game developers, I got a bunch of foam games, quote unquote, whatever that means. I steered away as it sounded promiscuous, but as I was getting ready to take the lazy approach and just cut this portion of the video, I decided to take it one step further and check the Steam page for the game, and hopefully it would list the developer. And to my surprise, it would. This is the first bit of real information that I actually found on the game developer outside of their name, of course. While scrolling through this developer's accolades and their games and such, the first thing that I noticed was that 7 Days Until Morning has the developer and publisher listed as Foamy, but when I clicked on the link, it took me to a dev page called Dish Up Studios. I don't know if Foamy runs Dish Up Studios, but that's what I'm going to assume because there really isn't much information about the game devs. In fact, 7 Days Until Morning was only the third game in general by this game dev, with the two previous being Toings Pops and Toings Pops 2. And it was the game dev's first game to actually cost money, as Toings Pops 1 and 2 are both currently free on Steam. Another assumption I can make about the game dev is that they're Russian or some kind of Slavic language, and that's based on the trailer for Toings Pops 1 right here.
You asking why?
And I don't blame you. The only way it can be beaten is by cheat.
It's for business, so stay
You do not know the terrible mistake is that you have set into motion. You have sealed your face.
Tell me why you always want to know what I'm doing down in Baltimore. You tell me to know everything you want.
And it was after seeing this trailer that I expected Toings Pops 2 to be of a similar nature, but, yeah.
I am tired of you doubting me, Jeremy. That's all you ever do.
So it's safe to say that this game dev was indeed on some shit when he made these games, but after a little bit of closer examination, it was so much more clear why Toings Pops 2 looks so drastically different than Toings Pops 1. And that's because Twin Pops 1 is a single-player survival horror game, while Twin Pops 2 is a single-player adventure horror game. It all makes sense now. Even further to prove this point that someone that doesn't necessarily speak English made this game was that the only words spoken in 7 Days Until Morning are either written down on a monitor or a journal piece that you read, or it's that generic analog horror AI voice that you're all too familiar with. And one of the main reasons I'm making this video actually is that there's barely anything about this game online, with me being able to literally count on one hand how many sources I found for this video on this game. I found a Steam page which contained by far the most information outside of the game, a Reddit page that was fucking useless, there's literally no information on it other than the trailer for the game, and then a Reddit bot hyping it up. There's an achievement tracker page which helped a lot for in-game purposes, and there's a 44-minute YouTube playthrough with no microphone, and mind you, this was the only YouTube video on this game I could find, and that was it. Those are all the bits of information I found about this game from other sources, including from other players. Not including, of course, reviews on Steam and Xbox and all the other reviews and such, which there aren't many. But as I said, most of the information I found within or about the game, I guess, came from Steam. On the achievement tracker, there's little to no data except a few entries on the achievements of the game that did help me discover the achievements later on, but we'll get into that later. I also don't think I've heard anyone talk about this game like online at all, which is crazy because it genuinely feels like an indie game like a Let's Player would just jump onto for a short single video in that era of Let's Plays where they made short or played short horror games. I checked the game's all-time peak on Steam just to see, get a little idea of how popular this game was even at its highest, because this isn't a recent game. It came out July of last year. But looking at its Steam page, I had checked that it peaked at 148 players, and the game itself has a total of 6 total Steam reviews, all of which are positive and state very good things about the game. They glaze it, they say that the story is really good, they say that the horror mechanics are really good, that they don't overdo it. All the good things you can say about a horror game, they say. This game seems liked by everyone that has played it, so why doesn't it have more attention? Well, that's probably because, like I said, it came out a year ago. But then that begs the other question of, why didn't it get much attention a year ago when it came out? Well, unfortunately, it seems like one of those hidden gem games that just didn't get shown off too much. How I found it was genuinely kind of an accident. I was just scrolling on the Xbox store, I think I was looking for something else when I saw it and thought it looked decent, and so I threw $6 at the game dev. In this video, I'd like to discuss the story of 7 Days Until Morning and give my own opinion on why this game deserves more attention. So, let's start by getting into the game itself. 7 Days Until Morning is divided into small little chapters, kind of, that are all just each individual days, and each day you have a set of tasks or goals to complete, and you do them, and they all are steps in the direction of both learning more about the world you're in and also getting off of Pluto and hopefully back to civilization. Now, if you've never played 7 Days Until Morning, which you probably haven't, it starts out with zero explanation, unless you read the game description, of course, which even then only states that you land on Pluto, so whoop-de-fucking-do, you know what planet you're on, cool. But when you hit new game, you might be startled at first because you're not giving a loading screen like normal games. Instead, your game freezes as it loads, and suddenly you're seeing a spaceship floating aimlessly through space. That's you. And that planet you're drifting towards? That's Pluto. When you land on the surface of Pluto, your ship gets stuck in the ice, and you're tasked with only one objective: seek shelter. The shelter in question happens to be an abandoned research lab nearby where you landed. Upon landing, you might think your character is some kind of researcher or astronaut, as I did too. When you make it to the research facility, there's a radio inside with a message waiting to be played, a machine that's emitting some kind of UV light to artificially grow food, a rack for your suit to charge. The fuck? Oh. What the flibbity bibbity? Dude, I thought I hung myself. And most important part of any human survival, a toilet. The first thing you'll do is listen to the message on the radio, and this is where you learn your first bit of major information about the world you're living in. Kind of. You learn that Earth, Mars, and Venus have all been destroyed. And you also learn that whatever destroyed these planets, you shouldn't even attempt to fight because you will die. This is the only real bit of information that you're given on the first day. Now, other than the things I mentioned in your new living space for the week, there's also a really dope bobblehead. So, of course you're going to ring it when you first get to day one, and it makes a funny little sound when you do so. There's also a computer next to it that gives like most of the lore to the game or whatever, but like, look at a bobblehead. It made a funny noise when you interact with it.
Instructions will be provided in 5.
And on the first day, the computer isn't even interactable, and it tells you that it can't find the connection and to try again later. So when you stop dicking around your new living space, you'll probably notice that your suit demanding effort of you. It's telling you to install a life support system or something, whatever that means. I don't know, it sounds important though, so you should probably do that. So you go outside, naturally, and you grab this weird-ass tube thing, connect weird tube thing to weird metal space dildo, and then plug another weird tube thing from the first metal space dildo to a second. And then you're done for the day and you get to go to sleep. Cool, simple, right? Easy, end of the first day. And now we get into day 2. Day 2 brings us a little bit more lore into the world we're living in. When you wake up, you'll notice a journal sitting on the desk next to the radio, along with another message on that radio. If you try to access that computer again, you'll be met with the same message as the day before, so instead you open the journal, curious as what it says. And this is where you find that it's an entry written by your own character, and your character states that they barely escaped Ganymede with their life, which is one of Jupiter's moons. Your character seems to be some kind of soldier that was deployed to fight possibly on Ganymede against someone or something that might have followed you to the planet of Pluto, though you're unsure. If you keep reading the journal entry, you'll see that our character suffers from an extreme form of survivor's guilt, being the only member of a squadron to survive and escape the battle. Our character also says that they have enough fuel in the ship for one more launch and that they need a plan before they decide to take that launch. Also comment on the disheveled state of the research station, but that's not really important. This is kind of a sidetrack thing, but something that I noticed in my own playthrough was that weird UV machine thing that grows food that I mentioned had some weird green crystals growing in them that I just assume is like cucumbers or something. But in the 44-minute playthrough that I found on YouTube, the person in that video had plants. So I don't know if it's a random chance that I got some kind of cucumber or the texture bugged, but that's just a random statement that doesn't have anything to do with the video. I just thought it was kind of interesting that there's different plants in the thing sometimes. After reading the journal entry that your character wrote, the next rational thing you might do is listen to the next radio entry. The next radio entry states that the CCOT are now doing evacuations of something called Sol, but it's just short for solar system, so it's not really that big of a secret. They're evacuating the fucking solar system. This, along with the mention of escaping Ganymede, gives us enough to clue together that this world takes place in either the future or some kind of alternate world. Of course, this isn't definitive proof, but it's enough to get your little gamer mind thinking. After doing your morning activities, such as listening to the radio, reading the journal entry, and ringing the bobblehead, you're tasked with turning on the large disc outside the research facility. You're tasked with doing this so that you may access the telescope for whatever reason, and after you do that, you get to go back inside and finally utilize the computer that's been sitting on the desk for 2 days, waiting for someone to get on a game of Valorant or two. But instead of getting my sweat on in a game of Valorant, I was prompted to type help for a list of commands or prompts to enter for informational purposes. On day 2, when you type help, you're given a list of planets, and whenever you enter the name of a planet and then you hit enter, you're redirected to a still image of that planet with 3 red dots around it, unless of course you choose one of the 3 planets that were mentioned to have been destroyed. Then you just get the 3 little red dots, which at first I didn't know what they were, but I think they might be like satellites or space stations surrounding the planet. I'm not sure. And it's actually through this part of the game that you're able to see the answer to the question of, is this an alternate reality or is this the future? And the answer is that it's the future. How far into the future, you might be asking? Well, the most recent date I believe the game gives is 2752, which is insane. Do you want to know another little fun fact about this world you find yourself in? You're not alone. The moment you leave the computer, you get an immediate notification, a warning, stating that there's movement outside, and you're tasked with finding out what it was. When you go outside, chills are running down your spine, you're waiting for a jump scare, you're waiting for something to jump out at you, and you find nothing. You can't tell if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you're just happy that there's no immediate danger. Maybe the game was messing with you. you think, moments before turning around and seeing a strange device on your power supply. You take the device off your power supply, and you start looking around, maybe to the edges of the crater, expecting to see someone watching you. Maybe it's just the open of the area, or maybe someone is, and you just can't see them. On day 3, you skip your odd confusions and immediately jump to the radio to get your next big chunk of lore. It's through this radio transmission that you learn that the designated space stations for each of the 3 planets that got destroyed are also now destroyed. And so in addition to the casualties on the 3 planets, there's an extra at least 150,000 that have been tallied on. Whatever's going on in space isn't getting any better, and humanity isn't winning. After the radio transmission, if you click on the book again, you'll notice a new entry in which our character discusses the actions he took the day before, and it's here that the character we play as starts to get suspicious that whatever we're running from has followed us, simply based on the motion sensor going off the day before. Our character ends this entry with the same thing he ended it with the day before, the quote, "I will survive for you." Next, after you boop the bobblehead for the 3rd day under the assumption you'll get an achievement if you'll do it every day, you'll probably check the computer to see if anything has been added. And it's there that you'll notice when you type help, many more options have been added. And if you type one of the planets again instead of the satellite image of the planet that you got last time, you get directly put into a little description and information bank of the planet itself and how it originated and got colonized. And fun fact about this game is that every planet in the solar system that we know of today is colonized or was utilized at some point for something important. And it's through this computer at this section of the game, technically any point after you do the original satellite image checkup, because you can do this on day 2 if you back out of the satellite image checkup thing and then go back into it, but day 3 is probably when most people would naturally find it. Let's start off with a basic planet that we all know and love. The Earth. The Earth in this game is seen as the capital of the CCOT, which, if you remember, like I said, is space government, and has a population of 17 billion people, which is kind of crazy to think about considering how Earth now has 8 billion people, and it's debated that the Earth is suffering from an overpopulation problem. We'll get into why the Earth in this future is able to hold 17 billion people in a little bit, but something that I found interesting was that the most recent event in Earth's history in this world, or the most recent important event at least, is that it was made a nature preserve due to rare flora and fauna, meaning the cities that were already there could no longer expand. And this happened, I believe, 400 years before the game we're playing takes place. Moving on to Mars, the second planet destroyed by this mysterious alien force, Mars is listed as the first planet humanity colonized besides the Earth and the Moon, and it has a population of 9 billion. It's in this description that there are mentions of terraforming and signals from Schmallen refugees on the Moon, Titan, bringing humans into contact with Schmallen kind for the first time. It's safe to assume, just based off their name and the fact that they're found on a moon, that the Schmallen people are a kind of alien. We don't know much about them yet, other than the fact that humanity found them quite early in their repeated space expeditions. So let's just move on to the 3rd planet said to be destroyed at the start of the game, Venus. Venus is described as the homeworld of Schmala and has a population of 13 billion people. When I first played this game, I was really high and really tired, so this next statement confused me, and that statement was that Venus was ravaged in a civil war in 2010. But then I later just assumed that they meant from the Schmallens that lived there, and in fact I would be correct. They used chemical warfare and nuclear weaponry, nearly ending the planet in a mutually assured destruction plot. Essentially, Venus in 2010 is what Earth would have looked like had the US and Russia actually gone to war in the 1980s. It's stated that 90% or over 90% of Venus was affected by the war, and this caused the Schmallen society to fall apart, with many refugees retreating to the moon Titan, to be later discovered by humanity, I guess. And after being founded by humanity or the CCOT or whoever, the Titan Agreement gets signed, which is essentially just a document that makes the Schmallen people a part of the CCOT, making them technically legal citizens, I suppose, if you want to look at it in a relative sense to us. Basically gave the Schmallens equal rights. That's what they did. And in 90 years after the Civil War, in the year 2100, the planet was cleaned up and rid of the effects of war. We also learned that the capital of Venus Lomala hosts a population of 35 million and is the oldest city in the entirety of the CCOT, being 250,000 years old, which implies that the Shmalan people actually predate humanity, or maybe not predate, predate humanity, I think. Were the humans 250,000 years ago? I'm not looking that up, dude. I don't care that much. And that's where Venus's entry leaves off, though, with it being 250,000 years old and being the oldest planet, yada yada. So, moving back to the help menu, well, I could go on about the other planets, and I will in due time, but I'm sure you've noticed by now that at the top of this list, one of the things in the information bank is the CCOT. So, type CCOT into the interface, and this is what it says. The CCOT stands for the Consolidated Council of Terra. I don't know why they include the O. You're not supposed to usually in acronyms. Maybe there's a rule about that I'm not aware of, but whatever. Let's move on. And it's, as I said, basically just the solar system's government. It's right here that we learned that the CCOT was formed in 2035, so not too far from today, and was originally formed as a subdivision of the United Nations, which is kind of ironic because as it's progressed in this world, it's become sort of the United Nations of space, which is really funny. Main countries that partook in the creation of the CCOT are Canada, China, India, and the UK, while the European Union is also listed, which just consists of most of the European countries. So a lot of Europe, UK, India, China, and Canada, which it surprised me not to see the US here, but I feel like the US might get like screwed over or something in this world because like it's not mentioned at all in this whole game, I don't think. This entry states that the CCOT was created for a lunar habitation dome in an attempt to support life on the moon, I assume. They never state this outright, this is just for assumption. And it was made so that not one governing entity held a grip over space or the colonies among them. And as society expanded, the CCOT is now the single governing force over the solar system, with cities on planets being self-governed, while still maintaining and following the CCOT's wishes and like their kind of outline for law and such. The CCOT would also become the main governing entity for Earth, like the main like owners of Earth. While many of the other planets kind of, like I said, worked on themselves, the CCOT owned Earth. Earth was CCOT territory through and through. And the final line of this entry states that the population is made up the aforementioned humans and Shmalans, but then they also mention how Centaurians are a part of the CCOT. We'll get into them in a little bit, but I feel like the next piece a lot of people might be a bit more curious about is the first place that humans have gone besides Earth in real life, and that's the moon. Curiously enough, the entry on the moon gives us a large chunk of information on how much of this world has come to be. In every description of the planet, the entry starts by stating what planet in the solar system it is, or how far it is from the sun. Like the Earth is the fourth, Venus is the second, so on, whatever. But the first thing that intrigued me about the moon's entry was that it was listed as the third planet. Now, I don't know about you, but the moon not being a planet is something you learn in kindergarten. Your friend that knows about space makes fun of you for being a dumbass and thinking the moon was a planet because it's just another floating rock in the space. Anyway, if you read a little further, you'll see that it says that the moon was previously a moon of Earth, as it is now. It clears everything up by stating that the moon was the most successful terraforming project in the history of the CCOT, and due to the moon's easy accessibility, it's safe to assume that the moon was the catalyst for the future of the solar system's societal escapades. Even more so because through this entry we learned that it was the first planet to have an artificial atmosphere and an artificial magnetic field. After implementing this stuff in the first stage, quote unquote, they start the second by moving the moon to an orbit around the sun between the Earth and Venus. And now, I know what you're saying. If they turn the moon into a planet and move it far away from the Earth, what happened to the tides? Won't the ocean go all wonky? Well, the entry explains this as well by stating that an artificial moon was created in order to sustain the Earth's tides and to keep the Earth unaffected by the disposition of the original moon. This entry on the moon gives us a lot more information about the world we found ourselves in, especially as to how the Earth can hold 17 billion people while currently in real life it's struggling from a possible overpopulation problem. That's debatable. I'm not here to debate that. not my cup of tea. So let's keep moving towards the bottom of the list, towards something relevant towards our character in the now and not in the past in this world. The ESP, or the Emergency Shelter Program, has a fairly short entry simply stating that it was just a program created by the CCOT to create shelters around the solar system in the event of emergency, such as someone being lost in space, someone such as yourself. It kind of reminds me of the Fallout vaults because it says that the sizes of the the sizes of the emergency shelters can range from 1 to 2 to 1,000 people, which kind of just reminds me of like the vault where they make like one guy live by himself with a bunch of puppets, or like they overpopulate a vault or something like in Fallout. Like it reminds me of that kind of shit. And that's really all we know about the shelters, which is the thing you're sitting in. So let's move on. There's another term we should learn about is the Shmalans, as they've been mentioned a lot throughout the lore files. And the first thing we learn from the Shmalan entry is that they actually make up almost half of the CCOT at 44%. And while this entry doesn't give us much more info, it does happen to give more details around how they were discovered by humanity. The Shmalan people were found in 2038 after a team of CCOT researchers discovered a distress signal on Mars, which led to them subsequently discovering the Shmalan people on Titan. It's stated that these refugees are survivors and escapees of the civil war that occurred on Venus in the early 2000s, and we then learned that Venus would be reclaimed, and as of 2735, the latest entry in a lot of these written entries, hosts a mixed population of 9 billion Shmalans and humans. Now, if you avert your eyes to the top of the list, you'll see the second option is Mercury. So, getting back into the planets, let's see what Mercury is up to in the future. As it turns out, even with all the futuristic technology and this seemingly casual advanced space travel, Mercury has only been landed on once. The reason is because it's the closest planet to the sun, making it the hottest and the most irradiated. Mercury is listed as a restricted area due to intense conditions, and that's all we really know about Mercury. There's not much listed other than that it's just not, you're not allowed to go there. Continuing down this list of planets we've yet to read about, Jupiter. Jupiter isn't actually important in its own entry. It does mention the things that everyone knows about Jupiter in real life, like it being a gas giant and also being the biggest planet in the solar system, but the main focus in Jupiter's entry isn't Jupiter, it's moons. More specifically, in my opinion at least, Ganymede, the moon that your character states they escaped from. After reading further, you'll find that Ganymede is credited as the most successful terraforming project in the history of the CCOT, with it now hosting a population of 4 billion people. It also mentions Jupiter's numerous space stations. It makes sense that Jupiter itself isn't really talked about in its own entry, as it is a gas giant, so you can't really land on it, experience it, explore it, and like try and survive it or whatnot, since you'll just fucking die, I guess. So, moving on. The next planet is one of the cooler planets in my own personal opinion. Actually might be my favorite planet in the solar system, and that's Saturn. Once again, it does mention the basics of Saturn, you know, like the position in space or to the sun or whatever, and like all that stuff. And the topic of this entry is also more so about the moon, or at least the new information that we don't know is more oriented towards the moon of Saturn. And it's the fact that Titan, one of Saturn's moons, is referred to as New Venus due to its climate, weather, and large Shmalan population, due to that being where they found refuge. Maybe it's just the name, but this continued to give me Fallout vibes, like New Vegas kind of. But maybe I'm just looking too much into it, and maybe I really just want to compare this to Fallout. How much do you like to talk about Uranus? Well, I like to talk about Uranus a lot. So let's talk about Uranus right now. Uranus's description continues the trend of not really focusing on the planet itself, and more so at the space station surrounding it. Space station surrounding Uranus. Continuing down the list, we have Neptune. Neptune is kind of a loser. Doesn't have anything significant about it to state. Not even an interesting space station to be discussed. It's stated that the only actually useful thing that Neptune has is a resupply and accommodation station orbiting it. Neptune is just kind of unimportant. And so that brings us to the final planet on the list, the planet our characters found themselves on, Pluto. I actually don't know if Pluto is still considered a planet in real life, but in this world's future, it's been made apparent that if the CCOT so desires, they can turn any floating rock into a planet through advanced terraforming. In the entry for Pluto, it's still described as a dwarf planet and states that in the past, Pluto is used for research and launch facilities for sending spacecrafts in interstellar space. Then goes on to say that thanks to easier and more efficient forms of transportation, the facilities have been decommissioned and that Pluto no longer has a population at all. In my own theory, I think that the emergency shelter you're taking shelter in was an old research facility. I don't think it impacts the plot at all or the story at all on whether you are or not. I just think it's kind of interesting that they would, repurpose, and it just makes sense that they would repurpose an old building for an emergency station. Now that we've gone through all the planets in the information bank, what's next? Well, more lore, of course. If you look at the list of entries in the computer, you find one titled Luna. Now, I'm going to warn you, before I enter this file and show you what's in it, it has some of the most grotesque written horror I've ever seen, like actual foul, disgusting shit. Like, I was gagging reading it, and I'm not lying. If you have a weak stomach, look away now. Like, plug your ears, do what you need to, maybe even fast forward a little bit past this entry, but the things said in this file, the horrors that hide beyond such a mysterious title, were not to be seen by the public. Do you think this file does really show the twisted and horrific nature that the creator of this game hides? Maybe just stupid, I don't know. What's Luna? I thought Luna would be just the moon. Okay. One thing that caught my eye was the entry titled Incubators, because I thought they might be cloning people or doing something cool with, incubators. But it actually just explains the weird UV light machine as what I already concluded as a machine that makes food faster. Now then, if you've been actually watching this video and not just leaving it on in the background, I'm sure you've noticed that there are similarities in the previously briefly mentioned Centaurians and the file entry sitting towards the middle of the list, Proxima Centauri. If you're a space nerd, you'll know that Proxima Centauri is a star. Proxima Centauri b is the topic of this entry, even though it's not the name, and Proxima Centauri b is labeled as a planet orbiting Proxima Centauri. It also goes into a bunch of space terms that I'm not really smart enough to understand, but when I look at Proxima Centauri, it said it was the closest star to Earth. In this entry, it states that Proxima Centauri b is governed by its own sovereign government named Proxima. It says that Proxima has further colonies in the Gliese 581 system, but that's not an option in our information bank, so we're just going to move on and kind of ignore that. There's not much we can do with that information. Like, this was the most confusing thing I've read because Proxima Centauri says it's a star close to Earth. I don't see how a planet can be orbiting it unless it's a terraforming thing. So we're just going to move on from this, okay? Ironically, it says nothing about the Centaurians, but if we happen to look in the Centaurians file, we learn that they do in fact come from Proxima Centauri, and it says that their appearance has been a long-studied topic because they closely resemble fauna on Earth, but I wrote animals in the script because it's easier for my dumb monkey brain to remember. It does say that they're sentient and members of the CCOT as of present day in the game, and though they originate from Proxima Centauri, they can be found on all sorts of planets belonging to the CCOT. They're described as sentient fauna-like creatures with maybe a human level existence, if that makes sense. Kind of reminds me of that one All Tomorrow story in which an alien race called the Q descend upon humanity to try and enslave them, but when humanity fights back, because we're not going to take that shit, the Q kind of turns us into weird, grotesque animal-like creatures. Some have sentience and some only exist to survive, breed, and die. It's a really fucked up story, but if you like fucked up stories, it's a really good read. It's these creatures that I imagined when I read this entry. It's clear that Centaurians weren't as important as they may have seemed at first. So, continuing through this list of lore, let's look at this one called Martonia, or Maritonia. I thought Maritonia might have had something to do with Martians or something, but it doesn't. Maritonia is described as the first colony established outside of the solar system by the CCOT. It also gives some information on the capital of Maritonia, Amarot. Amarot has a population of 3.9 million. It's quite minuscule for some of the other populations we've looked at so far, but still an enormous amount of people. I learned this colony was established a bit later into this world's timeline, being in 2535, which is 200 years before the events of the game take place, but you get what I mean. It states that due to the uniquely colored fauna and the warm climate, it's a popular tourist spot. Which it's kind of crazy to think about a future where an entire planet becomes a casual vacation spot, but maybe if that world is ended by mysterious aliens, I don't want it. Next on this list is another colony outside of the solar system and was the second colony established outside. It's the only other colony established outside the solar system listed in the information data bank at all, actually. Its capital is New Boston, which continues to give me Fallout vibes. New Boston has a population of 1.3 million people and is the fastest growing metropolitan in the CCOT. Described as very futuristic with mild weather and a lot of reasons for people to move there, with those two being the main ones. These colonies' capitals, low populations in comparison with some of the other planets and their capitals, gives me the idea that the colonies are newer, especially if Tarnil is the fastest growing colony with a capital of only 1.3 million. The next item on the lore list is the reactor. This entry states that, as a part of the emergency shelter, there's a reactor that helps maintain the power, even during major catastrophes. It states that these reactors are easy to use, quote-unquote, even if the individual doing so has no experience with nuclear power. This next and final entry was a bit confusing at first, as the title is just RET, and the entry itself uses a lot of big and confusing words. To summarize it in normal people terms, RET stands for Remote Energy Transfer, which, to summarize the big terms in the entry, is essentially just a way of transporting energy from one point to another through space, meaning it's basically just a long-distance portable generator. Now that you've read all the lore in this game's world, you're ready to finally progress. All of this lore is entirely optional, by the way. You can play this whole game without reading any of this. Now, continuing forward, you'll notice your task is to start the reactor that I just mentioned. You've read about the reactor, you know what it's used for, and you know that it's supposedly easy. Unless you mistake the cords for strange poles and wander around for 5 minutes, aimlessly looking for the proper cords to plug in. After plugging in the cords, you'll have to plug in the core, so it's a good thing you didn't throw it extremely far the moment you found it.
I found a ball. Huh. Watch it ball.
After turning on the reactor, you get to finally go to bed and rest your now knowledgeable mind. Now I just went through a whole big lore dump on you, so I'd like to take a quick break and actually glaze this game's music really quick. The music in 7 Days Until Morning is very retro horror-esque, and it really fits the vibe of the game. It's very sci-fi. Even if you don't go and play the game after this, I totally understand it's $6. Nobody wants to spend $6 on a game they're unsure about, especially if it's only like 40 minutes long. But even if you don't play this game after this video, I highly suggest that you at least give the soundtrack a listen if you can find it. I haven't looked for it, but I haven't been able to find much on this game, so I assume the soundtrack might be a tad bit harder to find than most soundtracks. But I'm sure you can find it. I'm actually 100% sure you can probably find it. Moving on to day 4, you're automatically woken up in the morning by a blaring emergency light. Although it may feel like you need to respond with some urgency, you can actually just take some time to listen to the radio message, read the journal entry, and possibly the most important task of every morning activity, boop the bobblehead. The radio transmission states that the sanctuary stations for Jupiter and Saturn have been destroyed and evacuated, with the death toll estimated to be around 250,000. It's not looking good for the people of the CCOT. When you read the journal entry, you learn why exactly you had to activate the reactor the previous day. It's because Pluto is slowly drifting further away and is out of range of the RET device, meaning they can't receive as much energy. Our character's only source of power is now this reactor that we just set up, and we also learned that the generator we already had contained full power, which should last us about 2 weeks, stated by our character. In theory, you should have plenty of time to get your ship out of the ice, back up and running, and back into space, hopefully to reach salvation. Except, The red lights flashing around you indicate that you're not, in fact, set up with plenty of time. Something is going wrong, and now it's up to you to figure it out. Upon putting your suit on, you're tasked with checking on the reactor immediately. On your way to the cellar doors that lead to the reactor, they blow up right in front of you and go flying. Something's wrong with your reactor. The moment you go downstairs, you're immediately plagued with radiation, and if you stay too long, you die. When you die in 7 days until morning, you just restart from the beginning of the day. After you muster up the courage to run down to the basement to figure out what you need to do, you see the switch that you previously used to turn the reactor on blinking. So you flip the switch again and the core explodes. You have no more power coming from your reactor. After turning off said reactor, you'll notice that the radiation doesn't stop coming, it just starts building much slower. Now, your next task is to pick up the scattered pieces of the core and throw them into a box on the surface marked with a radiation symbol. It's right next to the cellar doors, or what was the cellar doors. Now that you've picked up all but one, you...
Oh, wow. And another thing that doesn't help is... Oh, fuck!
Yeah, that got me. I wasn't expecting it. But after your heart stops trying to jump out of your chest, you'll be able to climb out of the basement and back in your shelter. If you wait a bit, you'll actually notice your objectives start to speak to you, begging you to go back inside and finish the day. There's actually a lot of neat details throughout this entire game, such as in the top left, there are many messages throughout the game that will speak directly to you, and I do want to go over those towards the end of the video. The next day, on day 5, there are no flashing lights when you wake up, so you get to calmly boop the bobblehead, listen to the radio transmission, and read your journal entry, and also just catch your breath for a quick second. The radio transmission once again lacks any good news, simply stating that the station that all the escape pods and rescue shuttles were going towards had been destroyed, and now they're heading towards another sanctuary that's supposedly outside of the system. When you read the journal, you learn what your character's thinking what's more, and now he knows for a fact that whatever he was afraid of following him has officially followed him, and knows exactly where he is and how to mess with him. And then our character writes something peculiar in the journal. He writes that he wants to leave, but he can't, not because of the ice or lack of repairs, but because it feels like something is making it so he can't. He ends the journal with the same as every ending to the journal, with the words, "I will survive for you." At this point, I think whoever this you is that our character refers to no longer matters at this point. I'm pretty sure our character is just referring to the entirety of his friends and family, but I think the repeated use of it at the end of each journal entry evolves from a message to the deceased to a mantra for himself. The character will survive for themselves. After you put your suit on, you're tasked with grabbing a pulley. At first, you may wonder where this supposed pulley is, but that's why they give you a waypoint telling you that it's the big white brick that lay behind your character's desk. After grabbing the pulley, when you go outside, you'll notice a big blue brick next to where your ship crashed. This is where you're supposed to put the pulley. Another thing you'll notice if you look around as you walk outside is the same creatures that jump scared you outside of the reactor are now watching you from the edges of the crater. After you put the pulley down and wait just a little bit, you'll get an emergency notification stating that there's danger all around you, which makes considerable sense considering the dangerous mystery aliens all around you. Then your screen glitches and you'll notice that your ship is now on its side and upside down, which I didn't even notice until like my third playthrough, I'm gonna be honest. I was more focused on the line of dark figures that watch you from the ridge. Tasked with escaping back to your shelter, your suit actually pleads with you to do so. No matter how long you stay out, the aliens won't attack you, and even if you get too close to them, they just disappear. Even the ones in the massive line. So, after you make it back to your shelter, you can finally go back to bed and just rest for the night, hoping to figure out a plan in the morning. Day 6 is when everything officially goes to shit. All hell is let loose. All the objects in your shelter are sent flying around. Your desk, your computer, your journal, your bobblehead, your incubator, all of it. After catching and ringing the bobblehead, you'll most likely go outside. Except, instead of pressing the button for the doors like you normally would, they fly off, letting you walk right out. At first, you may think this is a dream or some kind of nightmare. The sky outside is black and covered in red dots, with one giant red dot towering over them all, almost resembling something similar to a sun. The world around you looks like you're stuck in Itachi's Genjutsu, so maybe it is a nightmare after all. Your equipment is bugging out, the power percentage on your suit starts bugging, everything's going to shit. And then you notice you're experiencing radiation. It starts climbing faster and faster until your screen eventually freezes and you're loaded directly into day 7. Day 7 is the last day of the game and it starts back inside of your shelter. All your stuff is thrown about, scattered across the room. Your computer is face down and your door is missing. Then you'll look down and notice that your suit's power level is at 10%. In 7 days until morning, you actually have a suit power percentage the whole time you're outside and inside while you're using your suit. And if your suit runs out of power while exposed to the outdoors, you die. You'll spend more time in the suit during the day, then putting it in the suit recharger can help, but that's not an option on day 7 as it was destroyed the night before. Face down, you can still actually access the computer, but it doesn't say anything different. But if you didn't read the lore before and you want to know it on day 7, you can. You can choose to read it at the end. After that, you'll ring the bobblehead for one last time, walk outside, and say goodbye to the shelter that's kept you safe for the week. As you walk outside, a somber music begins to play. You have no quest, no task, the suit is no longer guiding you. It's not talking to you. You walk out towards the ship and notice your oxygen percentage on your suit depleting. As you get closer, the percentage drains lower. As you make it only a few feet from your ship, your character collapses on the ground with 1% left. The credits roll, and then it cuts back to your character's perspective on the ground. The oxygen in your suit has fully been depleted, your character is tired, and the worst thing has happened. You didn't get an achievement for booping the bobblehead all 7 days. And your character fucking dies because of it. Though there's not much more to the entire story past what I've already discussed, I would like to discuss what lies beyond the surface for this game. As I finished my first playthrough, I felt as though I was missing something. Like there was some kind of massive lore that I was missing. Then I looked at the achievements and noticed that there's 10. I only had 7. What could I have been missing? Well, the 7 achievements I had were for making it through each of the days. All of the achievements for this game are secret achievements, so there's no way of me knowing specifically what each of the 3 achievements were without me looking them up. But of course, there's little to no information about this game online. When I looked up how long this game was, I couldn't even find an answer to that. It kept just popping up with 7 Days to Die or other games that begin or include the number 7. But after a bit more searching and sifting through pools of the internet, I found an achievement tracker page for the game, which had a comment from at least one person for each of the achievements, just listing out a guide of how to get them. Turns out that these last 3 achievements have to be done in one play session in succession of one another, meaning you can't do achievement 10 without getting achievement 8 first. Well, achievements 8 and 9, I guess. So, to get the 3 achievements, one would have to start a new game. And so I did. I started another playthrough. I escaped Ganymede once more. I crashed into Pluto again, and I had a couple of days before alien threats tracked me down to kill me. So I thought, if you actually turn around and look behind you to the edge of the crater you crash in, you'll notice that they've been watching you from the start. They've been watching your every move. They were always going to win. But nonetheless, I had achievements to hunt. Even if my fate was sealed, I took another look at the 3 achievements and noticed something interesting. On the day achievements, it says in the description that you have to complete X day based on whatever day coincides with the achievement. For the last 3, the ones titled Unfamiliar Trinket, Transformed, and in all caps, Brutus, it's a bit different. When you have them unlocked, the description does change to maybe like a hint at how to get it, which doesn't make sense at why it would hint you to get it, whatever. But on Achievement Tracker, Unfamiliar Trinket and Transform's description said, you will die here, while Brutus's said, you died here. This made me think that this would lead to another ending for the game. I don't know why, but perhaps if I do these 3 achievements, my character might survive. So I decided that I'd read from the guide of each achievement to figure out what achievements to get or how to get these achievements. A few times I was granted useful information, and you'll see why it didn't even end up helping that much in a little bit. To start this streak of achievements, you must ignore the eyes watching you at the start and continue on. The first achievement, Unfamiliar Trinket, requires you to hug the right wall on day 1 as you spawn in until you eventually find this strange metal piece on the ground. It's pretty easy to see because it's fucking glowing blue. Remember that glowing blue color for later. After this, the next guide, the one for the achievement Transformed, said that on day 2, after you get the satellite up and running, you'll have to type Sedna into the little command thing where you see the fucking images of planets. So when you open up the planetary list on this new day, you'll find an option titled Sedna, and you'll notice that this option wasn't there on your first playthrough. The reason being that you didn't grab the fucking metal piece. What I mean by you have to do the achievements in succession of one another to be able to do them. So if you don't get the metal piece, then the option for Sedna in the database doesn't pop up, so you can't see this image. After a quick Google search, I actually did find out that Sedna in real life is another dwarf planet similar to Pluto. So this means that this planet might have also been used for similar research purposes. If you're unlucky as me, the Sedna option won't even appear, even if you get the metal piece, and you'll be softlocked from the achievement for a little bit. And after doing some research, knowing about the game itself, I found that a common thing that must be done with games that have achievements that rely on each other like that is to start from the save before you started doing the train of achievements. But the problem for that is that this game doesn't have saves, and even if it did, the first achievement, or the first train of achievements is at the start of the game. And 7 Days Until Morning has a really good story, but I'm not going to glaze it and say it's a perfect game. It has hella bugs. One of the more annoying bugs that I encountered was that when the dark figures spawn in a line on the ridge just before that, when you get the big danger warning, you can't move for as long as the danger warning is up. But there's a bug where the danger warning just won't ever disappear, and you just can't move, and the only way out of it is to restart the whole day. It's bugs like that that make it really annoying, and that made me have to restart from the very beginning of the day so often. Though it might have been a waste of time, I was still going to restart and start a new game. So after quickly grabbing the metal chunk and doing all the day 1 tasks, I moved to day 2 and the send option was there. So I typed it in and got the image. And it's because of these bugs that I'm incapable of 100%ing 7 Days Until Morning. The reason being is because one of the biggest bugs, or the biggest bug in the game, revolves around the last achievement, Brutus. And basically, to get it, you have to get the metal chunk on day 1, type in Sedna on day 2, and then on day 5, when you place the pulley down, go, instead of running away from the dark shadow figures on the fucking edge of the crater like a little bitch, you find another metal chunk that should be glowing blue, in my imagination it is at least. And for some reason, no matter what I do and no matter how many times I restart the entire game, I can't get this second metal piece to spawn in there. It doesn't spawn in at all. I played through this game about maybe 5 or 6 times because it's only like a 40-minute game, and I've yet to be able to get the achievement. I don't know if it's soft locked or what, but the achievement isn't obtainable. Therefore, I won't know if there's an alternate ending if you get the achievement. An absolute tragedy indeed. I mentioned multiple times throughout this video that this game is not very popular in the slightest, with the all-time peak on Steam being 148 with only 6 reviews. There's not much information about the game online, and strangely enough, there's a video that I watched by the YouTuber Guillaume Brien, sorry if I butchered that has a full playthrough of the game. He has no mic and just basically goes through the whole game. The view count on this video is only 100, but when you look at the type of video, the micless gameplay, the lack of editing, and just the style it's in, it kind of makes sense that it has 100. It reminds me of something you might upload when you finally learn how to capture gameplay, you know? It's no offense to the YouTuber himself, because I actually did use this video a lot to review the footage for this when I wrote the script for this. So this video was very helpful, and it's literally the only video on the internet that I could find of this game. So no disrespect to the creator at all. I'm just saying, like, the way that it's framed, it just looks like a video that you would be scrolling on late night finds or something, you know. The peculiar part didn't come from the low view count, in my opinion. It came from the low view count in correlation with the high subscriber count of the YouTube channel. Guillaume Brien is a channel that has almost 30,000 subscribers, So that makes this video having only 100 views now become kind of odd. It does prove my point though that this game has no presence in the media, and I feel like more people should pay attention to it. Oh, I hear you asking, why did I decide to make this video on a random indie game? Well, simply because I noticed its lack of popularity, and if anything, just to add to the low amount of content surrounding 7 Days Until Morning. I thought the story of this game was incredibly good and deserves more recognition. I also would like someone to highlight this final achievement for me to see if anything actually changes after you get it. I actually did think about paying another $6 for the Steam version on my computer to play it there, since I played the original or played my playthroughs on the Xbox, but I'm not spending another $6 for one achievement. Fuck that. I genuinely don't think unlocking this achievement will bring me like a new ending to the game, but maybe there's a chance. I always hold out hope. So the last thing I'd like to add before closing out this video is that during one of my attempts at getting the last achievement while messing with the computer, I don't really know what I did, but when I typed help to pull up the lore directory after just pressing a bunch of shit, I got the message stating, if they won't tell the truth, I will. And this is during my final attempt at getting the achievement. And this proves that I was missing something massive within this game, within like the lore of this game. Sadly, on this final run, when I got the danger notification section outside the pulley, my game did the glitch that I mentioned where I couldn't move and I had to restart the day. And after restarting the day, I did the pulley again and went to the wall where the metal piece was supposed to be, but it didn't spawn. This was when I had actually given up and decided that I'd wrap up the video by asking whoever watches this to help and participate. And I don't think the achievement is anything massive or huge, but the lore of this game is super cool, so if there's more lore that I haven't found, it'd be cool to hear. And if you're looking for a good indie game made in a strange corner of the internet that has a decent story, then this game might be for you. And if this game doesn't have any extra lore and any of that stuff, then I just enjoyed making this video and talking about this strange and obscure indie game. This is the most recent game from the developer Foamy, aka Dishop Studios, and it's the only one that costs money. It's a short 40-minute experience, and it's only $6 on Xbox and Steam. I think it's worth a try if you enjoy decent, short horror stories. Anyway, my name is, was, and always will be Word, and this video has been 7 Days Until Morning. Thank you for watching.